Okay, hello. We're back. I hope we're back. Oh, this is weird. I had some technical difficulties earlier today getting onto Twitch, as I think many other people did. So yeah, we had to put off this bonus stream a little bit. Sorry, all sorts of stuff going on with screens as well that I will tell you about in just a second. But yeah, the bonus stream got put off for a little bit because Twitch was not letting me broadcast, which is too bad. But yeah, it's been interesting, or it is interesting trying to carve out time to stream when you're a new dad. And a lot of it was based on when our daughter is asleep. So huge thanks to Tally for letting this happen while I am while she is not asleep, while she is in fact awake. Though she is a little bit ill today, which is not the greatest thing. But anyway, this will be a relatively quick stream. The idea is to just sort of recap what we did last time and make a few changes and also test out some new tech. So I'm very interested in how the tech is working in general today. I've made some changes since last time. The most notable change that I've made is that I now turn this way. So my iPad has been living over here. So obviously our bedroom. And if you look down here, where is it? Oh, that's the mic. There's stuffed animals. There is the iPad, and that's where OBS is living now, along with you in the chat. So yeah, I've got it set up as a second monitor, which is pretty cool. But that requires uh, use of USB cables. So I'm now at my USB limit. So I had to actually, my mouse broke last time. I had to go get a new mouse. Word of the wise, if you ever need these Apple accessories, people who buy iPads, a lot of the time, they don't want them. They buy not an iPad, an iMac. If they buy an iMac or they buy a Mac Pro, that comes with them, they are like, no, I have a way better keyboard and mouse. Why would I want this piece of garbage? And so they sell them on Craigslist really cheap, brand new, which is good because these are also really expensive things for what they are. Anyway, so yeah, very interested in knowing if the tech is working because my main worry with the using the iPad as another monitor like this is that it will peg the processor more than it is already pegged, streaming and developing. So if that becomes an issue, please let me know. Or if I'll be able to judge compile times myself, obviously. But if you notice a lot of lag or drop frames or whatnot, I'm not seeing any here. Please let me know. I guess number two, how's the mic situation? Some people were talking about a hot mic last time. I've tried to bring the mic level down a little bit. Is it too low? I have the gain literally all the way down, so I would prefer to keep it that way. But I can raise it in software a little if I need to. Um, and I guess test number two. Let's open iTunes and bring that over to the other monitor too. So much nicer to have another monitor again. But part of the stuff with this setup is also trying to make sure that no, I want you over here. Trying to make sure that the setup is portable enough that it can be struck when needed to allow Tally to use her sewing desk. This is like an interesting streaming setup because everyone I know has like these big, huge gaming PCs, and I have a 5-year-old laptop. So, but it's good because as I say, I can remove it when necessary. Tell me how this music level is for you. So this is Big Giant Circles Imposter Nostalgia playing at max volume on iTunes, which should be routing into OBS. It looks like it is, and it looks like it is too loud to me. But So I should probably bring it down a little bit to like there. And then I can adjust my own sound output levels separately. Oh. Okay. So let's go with that for now and switch over to our actual stream. So for those of you who were not here last time, I tried to. I assumed that Twitch would automatically save things to VOD. Still loud? Okay, I'll bring it down a little more. I assumed that Twitch would automatically save things to VOD. It didn't. And so the idea of the stream was to like build an app from beginning to end and actually show off the process. But part of that was like I wanted there to be VOD still of the entire thing, so that it was available if you like wanted to catch up and see what we did, or just go copy the app that I made and pirate it or whatever. Then you could go do that. Yeah, I didn't realize that Twitch has VOD turned off by default, and this is a new account, so it did not get saved. And again, because of my super lightweight setup, I don't have recording turned on OBS. I tried it earlier today, and it is not sustainable, so we're not going to do that. Yeah, I have VOD turned on now, so we're going to take the next hour or so to go over what we did last time, correct some of it. Now, one of the reasons as well that we scheduled these on Friday nights was so that there was recovery time built in, so that like if I was like super wired or whatever after the stream, then I could go to sleep and have the entire weekend to recover before having to go back to work. Where was I going with that? Yeah. Oh, so part of the thing with coding late at night is that then late at night you like wake up and you're like, oh, I should have done it that way. And so I had a few of those. So we'll go in and we'll fix some of that while we're reviewing what we did last time, and that will sort of make the VOD circle complete, and bring us up to date on what's going on. So let's move over to that. Okay, so here's our Deck of Many Things project. Just as a review for that, the idea is to make a Deck of Many Things app, which I guess I didn't really outline last time anyway. The Deck of Many Things is a magical item in Dungeons and Dragons. It is sort of a campaign ruining magical item. When you find the Deck of Many Things, what tends to happen is like everyone in your party like draws a bunch of cards from it. I'm making hand gestures that I just realized you can't see. Everyone in your party draws a bunch of cards from it, and the cards all do crazy random things that are sometimes very good, like they give you powerful magic items and make you go up levels and stuff like that. But they also sometimes do very bad things, like make you fight an avatar of death, or be forever killed, or imprison your soul somewhere far away forever. So it's basically like a campaign wrecker. That's that's my impression of it. It's like every time it shows up, goofy, wacky stuff happens, which is super fun the first time you do it, but it will almost without fail cause crazy random stuff to happen. That's the wrong find. Crazy random stuff to happen in your campaign, which may just kill the entire party out of nowhere, or do something to that effect. So it was funny when we were in high school in playing Bill's Temple of Elemental Evil campaign. Bill put the Deck of Many Things in just because he thought it was funny, and we found it, and basically what was happening is like all of us, like myself and James and Morgan and Bill and a bunch of other people that we know, were running D&D campaigns like at the same time, and we would like trade out week to week. And after Bill did it, then everyone introduced the Deck of Many Things at some point. It would be like, well, I don't have an idea for what we're going to do in today's D&D session. So they find the Deck of Many Things, and bad stuff happens. Usually it's like the entire party dies, and then someone pulls the card that's like reverse something that happened in time, and you go back to before you found the Deck of Many Things, and you just reset everything. And the DM is okay with it, because the DM's just like, you've been doing the Deck of Many Things for like 5 hours, and everyone's done with it. So, but it is super fun while it's happening, and it like really evokes that like that part of part of me that played D&D when I was in like junior high, and like really loved that random stuff. So yeah, so we're gonna make an app that is the deck of many things. You draw cards. It's gonna have art for those cards. Um, the idea to do this app actually happened a few years ago before I started working on before I started work as a professional iOS developer. And I was just sort of getting my feet wet, and I was like, oh, I have very limited skills. This is something that I could probably do, and I did like a bit of it, and then it never really took off. But while I was doing it, I had talked Ash, our friend who draws the awesome comic Megacynics, to do some art for it as well. So she'd started doing a bunch of art for it, which we have still, and I had the idea for how the app would generally work. So that's sort of the idea. Your party encounters the deck of many things. You pull out your phone, and then you're like, okay, draw on this, and it gives you, it displays cards and the game effects of the cards, and so on. Uh, I so importantly, there are some rules associated with it that we're going to translate into our app. So before you draw, you declare how many cards you intend to draw, and you can't draw any more than that. So like once you have drawn that number of cards, you're done. Um, and so there are cards that affect the number of cards that you get to draw as well. So that's something else we need to account for. It can't just be basically like a slideshow. Some of the cards actually have to have effects on the game session itself. So yeah, let's. So I guess the first thing that we worked on. I'm going to close this for now. The first thing that we did is we opened a playground, and a playground is something that exists as part of Xcode for Swift, and it basically allows you to see your code running sort of in real time. It's a loop that automatically compiles anything that you write into it, and just runs it immediately. So we can declare classes or types or structs or enumerators or whatever in here, and then use them immediately, just as if it was like a main method in a C program, or just basically like we were just immediately compiling it and running it. And so it gives us preview information over here, and it gives us output, terminal output down here. So like logging statements and whatnot. So what we did to start with is that we created a card class. Now it's not actually a class; it's a type in Swift. In Swift, we have three major types. We have enumerators, structures, and classes, and they have different properties. Enumerators and structs are both values. So you kind of treat them like information. You can store them in memory, but you can't reference them in memory. If you try to reference them, but if you try and like point multiple variables at the same struct, that won't work. You will get two different structs. It'll just put a copy of it in the memory location for that pointer. So we say that is passed by value. So enumerators and structs both follow that rule, and then classes are a lot more complex, and they are passed by reference. So you can have one instance of a class pointed at by multiple things in memory. Just conceptually, if you are not an experienced programmer and you're like, why does this matter? It matters a lot. I'm gonna So think of something like a login screen, or a login, an account creation flow. So you've got like three screens, and the first one's like enter your username and password, and the second one's like enter your address, I don't know, and the third one is like enter your credit card information. The If you're using a class for the user, so you've got a user class, and you create that user in the first screen, and then you pass that user to the second screen as a reference. Then you change the user on the second screen and go back to the first screen. The changes that you made on the user are still there because both screens point to the same user. Whereas if you're using a structure for this and passing it by value, and passed a copy of the user from the first screen to the second screen, and changed that copy, then when you went back to the first screen, your changes on the user from the second screen would not exist anymore. So it's important to know when you're using each one of these, and what the consequences are when you do that. yeah, we created an enumerator. An enumerator is a very special kind of value that can have multiple cases. It's like a modal magic card, if you want to think of it like that. Like you've got your magic cards that are like do one of the next two, and it does one of those two things. That's basically what an enumerator is. It's modal, and you can see that what we have here is cases for every card in the deck. Now, what we did last time is we gave each of our cards. So this is like each card was able to know whether or not it was supposed to be in the full deck. So one of the traits of the deck of many things is that you have a sort of partial deck that you find 75% of the time and a full deck that you find 25% of the time. So the full deck is really rare, but if you find it, it has more possible effects. And one of the things that we did here was I was like, okay, so what we're going to do is make the cards know which deck that they're supposed to be in, or whether they're supposed to be in the full deck, which kind of makes sense, but it kind of doesn't. Cards shouldn't really know about decks. Decks have to know about cards, but thinking about it in like an abstract sense, they both shouldn't really know about each other, and which cards should be in the deck is definitely the priority of the deck. Now, so what we did was we had the cards know whether or not they were supposed to be in the full deck, and then when we created the deck, we looped through the cards, and if they said that they were in the full deck, we put them in the deck. Or if we were using if we said they were in the partial deck, then we put them in the deck, and if we were doing the full deck, we put them in the deck, and then that's how we determined our cards. I think that that's actually the wrong way of doing it here. I think that what we want to do is something that feels a little bit more brute force, but basically have the deck know about all the different permutations of the card, and when you create a new deck, the deck goes and just says, okay, I want all the cards, or I want some of the cards. Like the deck knows which cards are in which set. So that's what we're going to do. So we will remove this from that. Now, the other thing was that when we did this loop here, it required knowing about the number of cards, which required us to do some hokey stuff to ensure that we knew how many possible different kinds of cards there were. Under this system, we are no longer doing that. So actually, I'm gonna remove this. This no longer needs to be integer backed, which is important for another thing that we're gonna do later. I want to get a. I want to steal this. Okay, so we're not gonna make the cards care about that. Instead, what we'll do is I'm just going to paste this here for a second so that I've got access to it. So we'll make the cards be all of them except these ones. And so what's the easiest way to do that from a copy and paste perspective? Whoop. Okay, so let cards equal sun, moon. Oh, Playgrounds is breaking so hard. Star, throne, key. These should be auto-completing, but because Playgrounds is breaking so hard, they are not. Night. Void. Flames. Skull. Ruin. I'm not actually sure what that is. Uriel? Oh, there we go. Oh, one of the Gorgons. Okay, that makes sense. What does the card do? Da, da, da. Medusa-like visage curses you. Okay. I was curious. I did not know. Rogue. And Jester. Okay, so this feels way more brute force than the other way that we were doing it. But actually, we don't need this there either because we know Swift can infer that it's an array of cards from the fact that it only contains cards. Or not? No, it can't. No, we have to have that in because it doesn't have any idea what these cases are if it's not declared. So never mind. I could put card.sun, card.moon, card.throne, etc., but that would take way too long. So we're not going to do that. And then if I guess we'll call this variable is full. If is full, I'm sort of like calling a lot of these things by memory because I don't remember, or like autocomplete is not working. So I think it's append contents of, but I could be wrong about that. Replace contents of with nothing. Okay, so we can just call append with an array as a argument. Yes. So I have to put. It doesn't make sense. Is it just because it can't? Okay. Because it should know that it can only take an array of cards if it is. Cards is a generic, or hey, Admiral Maimo. It goes. It should know. Sorry, array is a generic class, so it knows it should have a type specified that goes into it, and it should know from this that it is an array of cards. Therefore, this should only take an array of cards, unless. Second. Swift array. Collection types. Oh no. I just want the method names. Because autocomplete isn't working. Because like the other thing that we can do is we could just say we could just create Yeah, Swift is nice because it does look like a lot of other languages, like basically anything C based. I'm also not sure why we're not getting output here. Um, because if I say like that, that'll work. Right. Okay, good. That's what I thought it was. Okay, I guess I must have typoed contents of somehow, because yeah, that seems like it should have been how it worked. Okay, so and then down here we'll say is full. Okay, that's better. So this feels a lot more brute force than what we were doing before, and there are some ways that we could clean it up a little bit so that it is not quite so like here's my list of cards. But I think that this is the safer way of doing this, and it allows us to not rely on really sketchy enumerator enumerator size figuring out. Instead, it allows us to just sort of have all these cards. It also means that if we were to come up with other cards, like if we were to come up with other cards that we didn't necessarily have cases for in this enumerator, like so if we were to create an other case and then store a bunch of information in it, because we can also do that. Then we could add those cards to the deck. And that's so one of the things with the deck of many things is that sometimes you will find one that has like other cards that someone has added to it, and so maybe you'll want cards that are not included in this list. So another thing that is uh, was pointed out as a bad idea last time was this whole business. And yeah, in general, you don't want to put your strings, your sort of like user-facing text, into the class itself. You want to have it in a table somewhere else in the app, or a text file, or pardon me, something else. So we're going to put this in a strings file later, but for now, um, I think what I'm going to do is just back this with a string. So enumerators can be backed by certain types, string being one of them. And I always put it as a comma, but it's a colon. So a string backed enumerator means that it has a string value for each of these cases. And so what I'm going to say for this is instead of switching on self, I'm just going to say return self.raw value. Now that'll return a string. Yeah, that's what I thought. But we don't actually want the raw value itself, so I'm going to say return self.raw value plus dot title. Now, what's that going to give us? That's not actually like the title of the card. What it is going to give us is sort of a lookup reference, so that basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to use it as an address later in development to look up the title of the card, which I'm going to store elsewhere. And I want to do this with all of the properties of the card. So we'll do this with dot rules text. Because the rules text for sure is going to vary by edition. So in some editions, there's going to be and the hope again was to add the capacity for the user to change the D&D edition, and so we're basically going to be able to create a system whereby we store in user preferences the edition that the user wants to use, and then we'll output a string from this method that's something like balance.title 3e or balance.title.5e or whatever, and then we'll use that as a lookup to find the actual text that we're looking for. And so that's good. Now, another thing that occurred to me was that the effect is so the effects are basically restricted to three things. So I wrote down for reference the cards that have effects that like change the effects of the game or of the draw. So here we had right now what we're doing is we're passing. So each card has a property that it is dynamically generated based on its case, and that property is a function. So this is a Swift way of writing a function that takes an integer and outputs an integer. So this, when down here in our game master class, when we were saying like we basically would set up a function that would draw a number of cards as per the rules of the deck of many things. And what it does is it says, okay, well, here's my number of draws while the number of draws is greater than 0. So while I have more than 0 draws left, grab a card, and then if the draw a card from the deck. Right, we're doing a review here, so we should probably talk about the deck first. Regardless, we'll talk about what that does in a second. So draw a card from the deck and decrement the number of draws by 1. So if it was 1, it goes down to 0. If it was 2, it goes down to 1, etc. And then if the card has an effect, which again, only these cards will return an effect, then use that effect. And the card effect is a function that is passed to the game master by the card and then run by the game master. And then this is just our output so that we know what's going on. Now, it occurred to me when I was thinking about it later that night that the card effects, if we look back at the cards, there's only like 3 things that they do. There's a mandatory draw, an optional draw, and no more draws, I believe, are the 3 things that it can do. Don John, Fool, Idiot, Jester, Void. So Don John, you draw no more cards. Fool, discard this card and draw again. Okay, so that adds a draw. Idiot, you draw 1 additional card. Jester, you can draw 2 additional cards, and then Void. Draw no more cards. So there's only 3 effects: draw, optional draw, draw no more cards. So what I'm going to do, instead of doing this, which is is a thing, but not super great. It's very clever to pass functions around, and especially when you're like dynamically generating a function with an enumerator and then passing it to another, but it's not super clean. So what I'm going to do instead is create an enumerator called effect, and I'm going to have this be it's a public enumerator, so any other class can see the effects, and its cases will be case draw, case optional draw, case no more draws, end draws, or just end. And then for these, another fun thing that we can do with enumerators is we can have them we can have certain cases contain information. So in the case of draw and optional draw, we can say, we can have them uh, pass on how many cards to draw or to optionally draw. Okay, and then I guess we will put back this effect variable. But instead of passing back a function, I guess I shouldn't have deleted all those things. That was silly. Yeah. Give me back my... Yeah, there we go. So instead of returning a function, which was very, very clever, showing off language features, that's good. We'll return an effect, and then on Donjon, we'll return and int. Yes, return Treebeard. You must fight Treebeard or be forever destroyed. And on Donjon, we will say draw. On idiot, we will return. Idiot was optional draw. Idiot is optional draw 1. Jester is optional draw 2. I keep expecting autocomplete to click it to work, but it is not doing that. And the void is end. Cool. That's great. Now we need to tell our game master what to do with this. Again, like, can't hear the music anymore. That's interesting. Did I stop it somehow? I don't think so. It may have just faded out for a little bit. Not sure. Let me know in a few minutes if it's back. So basically, this is the same sort of premise as what we were talking about before, where I said that that the cards should necessarily know what kind of deck they're in. The cards shouldn't necessarily be responsible for figuring out what to do with the information as to what's on their text. That should be up to the sort of game master. What we're calling the game master class right now. This is going to be probably in a view controller at the moment, or when it's actually implemented. So it'll be like more closely connected to the view that it's in, which I know is not like the greatest thing, but is the way that iOS apps tend to work. So you're right, actually. I'm also not seeing... No, I'm seeing maybe a little bit of music. Is the music back? I see more going on there. Somehow, I think I may have accidentally set the volume really low. But let me know if that is obtrusive. Just realized that I wasn't seeing any levels from it. Yeah, I may have accidentally muted the music. Oops. The music is Big Giant Circles, which is awesome, and he is kind enough as to allow his music for VODs. I hope. I believe that he has, though, so I will absolutely credit him and make that happen. But it's also nice to be able to have music playing in the background. I actually don't have it playing because I find it difficult to narrate while it's on, so I can't actually hear it. Okay, so let's go... so instead of this, so where we say if there's a card effect, then run the card effect, which again is very clever. What we're going to do is say switch on card dot effect And then we'll say case dot draw, and we'll say let number, and we'll say number of draws. Number of draws plus equals number, and then case dot optional draw, let number, number of draws plus equals number, and then case. Oh wait, did I not make that optional? Right, this effect needs to be optional. That's important. So case dot, oh, oops, optional. Case dot end number of draws equals 0. Now we need to fix some stuff. I'm just going to just do this in. Bring this up here. I kind of like keeping things on one line if they are only one-liners, but I know some people do not like that. That looks kind of messy. In any case, there's a problem here in that we don't know if so it says, if you look at our compile error up here, it says draw is not found in card.effect ? And a language feature of Swift is that it doesn't allow you to have nils. It doesn't like nils. So nils can't just exist out in the wild. And big reason for that is that very frequently apps will crash when things are set to nil when they are not supposed to be. So it's like you initialize a class and you've got all these properties in it and they're all just set to nil by default, and pardon me, you're like, yeah, but whatever, I'll have set the property before I'm going to use it. And like most of the time you will, but then your coworker goes and creates an instance of that class and sets some of the properties but not others, and that somehow gets ingested into some process that you are using, and something that you're using calls one of those properties and goes, oh, it's nil, and then it breaks. So we don't want that. Swift hates that. So in order to avoid that, it insists that any nil be wrapped in a wrapped in a construct called an optional. And an optional has two sort of states. It's effectively an enumerator, actually. It has two states. It has the sum or none states. So the sum state has a property, like passes a property, just like this enumerator passes a property. And it contains whatever it is that you expect it to. And the none state, of course, contains nothing. So here, we're calling a switch on card.effect, but actually card.effect doesn't have any states because card.effect is not an enumerator. It is an optional that contains an enumerator, but the notation for it is the type followed by a question mark. It's not that different from how we subscript arrays. So like if you look here, like this is an array of cards, that's why it's in the square brackets, but we could just as easily put this as like array card. That's a messier way of putting it, but it is like literally what it's called. And similarly, this could be optional, an optional effect. Those are kind of the same thing. So they're both constructs that can contain more or less any other type, but they have special subscripting rules that are used to designate them. So Thanks, Wizard said. I got it. I got it before I saw that in chat, but that doesn't mean that you didn't put it in before I noticed it. Cause yeah. But thank you for noticing that. What this means is that we need to first figure out if there is an effect. Um, and so in order to do that, we are going to say, so we're going to do something called optional binding. And to do that, we say if let effect. So let declares a constant. Constant cannot be changed. We're creating a new effect that is constant, named effect equals card dot effect, and then instead of switching on card dot effect, we're just going to switch on effect. Okay, so what this does is it says, okay, whatever card dot effect is, that's an optional, and this pattern looks into that optional and it sees if there is a valid value inside it, and if there is, it binds it to this variable constant, and if there isn't, it skips over this if block. So now you can see that this is not throwing errors anymore because we are checking to see if there is an effect, and that's important because most of the cards have no effects. Right? Most of the cards have no effects. It's only these ones that will return an effect. So that is that. What else? I had this throwing errors, and I think that is good, but it's also like maybe more functionality than we need. So I think that because you just can't, if you're actually drawing from the deck of many things and you somehow outdraw the deck, I guess it's kind of GM's discretion as to what happens then, but I think that you basically shouldn't be able to outdraw the deck. So instead of like all this error handling, which I think is again awesome as to show off a language feature, maybe the better thing to do would just be to prevent you from increasing the number of draws beyond the number of cards in the deck. That seems like it would be a better idea. So let's remove the error handling. Get rid of, so the deck again is getting more and more sparse in what it actually does. The deck is basically a container class, container structure, passed by value, that holds an array of cards. When we initialize it, we set that array to contain either just these cards or also these cards if it's the full deck, and then it has one function which is draw, or one method, I guess, and it right now checks to see if there are greater than 0 cards. But right now, again, we're putting like the error handling on the deck instead of the game master, and I think it's just going to be easier to just let the game master make the decision as to what to do if there's no cards left in the deck. So I'm just going to remove this. So right now, I guess we can theoretically draw a card, try and draw a card if there are no cards, and get an error. But I'm like, I think that we're probably better off just, right, okay, I know why I did that, because I don't want to ever return an optional card. That's why. So I guess there's a couple of things that we could do here. Like, we need to know what happens if the user tries to draw a card when there's no cards left in the deck. And the sort of method that I came up with here was that we instead throw an error. Now, the other option that we have here is to return an optional card, which I think is valid. Like, we don't, if there are no cards left in the deck, then you just don't get a card back. So maybe we'll just do that. I mean, it's somewhat less elegant, but at the same time, that is relatively consistent with other parts of the language, like the core parts of the language. Like, if you I mean, this is obviously like out of index on an array is just always going to be out of index. But if you say like give me the first element of an array, like if you say like give me array first, then in it and there's no first element, or you say give me array last and there's no last element, then it will return nothing. Like those will return optionals. So it makes sense to me that this would actually return an optional in this case, and it allows us to again simplify our code drastically because we don't need this anymore. We can just assume that if we don't get a card back, then if we don't get a card back, then it's because there's no cards left in the deck. So just to go over what this method actually does, it creates a random index. So it looks to figure out which card it's going to look at in the array of cards, and it says okay, and it grabs a reference to that card, and then it removes that card from the array. Sorry, it doesn't grab a reference. Again, these are structures, so it copies that card into this variable, removes the card from the array, and then returns the card so that we can use it for whatever it is that we're going to use it for. Okay, so now here. We can say, all right. So we have an error that's popped up here, and it says value of optional card is not unwrapped. So now, because we changed this to return an optional card instead of a card, we need to unwrap this optional before we can actually do anything with it. We don't need to try that anymore because this no longer throws an error if it fails. So let card equals deck.draw. So this now has changed its type, so you can see it is an optional card. So here card.effect, optional cards don't have something called effect because they are optionals, not cards. So we have to say so we're going to have to say card.effect. Or, okay, so, like, obviously, how do I want to phrase this? This is basically valid, what is here. Because remember, we're saying, like, if card.effect isn't real, if it doesn't exist, then we don't want to we want to ignore this block of code and move on. But you can see that, or basically there are 2 points of failure now instead of one. So previously the effect was optional, but the card was definitely going to be there. So if the effect was not there, then this if would fail. Now it's if the card or the effect fails. So we actually need to use something we call optional chaining that will cause this not to look for an effect on this card if there is a it will cause it not to look for an effect on the card if the card itself isn't real. So so this basically is the same as saying if let card equals card, then let effect equal effect, then do the switch. But as the card is optional, it actually has to be able to fail once before then. And so we have this notation called optional chaining that allows us to chain stuff off of that. Now, again, this should only happen if the card is valid, because if the card is not valid, then we didn't actually draw a card. So what we're going to do is we are going to do what I was talking about earlier. Say if let card And actually, let's just conglomerate all this into that. So if let card equals deck.draw, then so if you have a valid card, all my indenting is off here right now. That's how it should look. So if let card equals deck.draw, then that's when we say number of draws decrement. Pardon me. And then if you have an effect on that card, do the effect, and then print this. So if we try and draw a card and there's no cards left, then we can drop the number of draws equal to 0 and break. Of course, none of these errors are showing me what I'm doing wrong here. Probably this is a brackets error. Arg, playgrounds, show me my errors. Give me a line number, please. Why are we... What did I do to break everything? I am not sure. Hold on just a second. This is annoying me, so I'm going to just open our existing project. It's been a long day and I'm quite tired, so I'm going to rely on the IDE to give me some feedback, please. Oh no. Oh, don't build with the iPad. No, stop, 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 stop. Oh no. That's what's causing it to go so slowly. I've hooked up my iPad to the computer so I can use it as another monitor, and that is what's causing it to go so slow. Um, right. It doesn't have any idea what any of this stuff is. Um, oh, that was silly. I forgot the if. Okay, that was the problem. So yeah, back to back to that. I'm just gonna toss this. Okay. Um, back to our playground. So if I can not mess up my syntax, now it's giving me error highlighting. Okay, so that should work. We should be back in business and able to go. So yes, if let card equals deck.draw. So if we are able to successfully draw a card and it returns something that is not nil, decrement the number of cards, or decrement the number of draws, remove the or execute any sort of effect, and print this. Um, and then otherwise print there's no cards left in the deck and number of draws equals 0. As I say, I think most of the functionality of this game master type is going to move into a view controller or some such. This is the joy of programming. Sometimes things do not work out, and sometimes you are streaming and hammering your processor really hard, and your error statements don't appear in playgrounds, which is very sad. I don't think I'm going to be using playgrounds for streaming much anymore because they are just so slow. So yeah. Anyway, cool. That I think is going to wrap it up for today. Thank you for watching the first time or coming back to watch, and for putting up with my refactoring. Having a lot of patience with that, even when things did not necessarily go correctly. As I say, that happens sometimes, and that is why things get why programming is hard, because you occasionally occasionally forget a word, and your tools aren't working, and it gets difficult. But no one's perfect, and certainly making any app is not just a practice of sitting down and hammering out code that you mostly already know. It is far more complicated and usually requires failing and testing every 5 seconds. So this is pretty good. All right, cool. That catches us up to basically where we are with our sort of the fundamentals, the models that underlie our app. Actually, we'll open this up again quickly. For the purposes of review, we also started an Xcode project, and we created a tiny bit of UI, which is to say we got rid of our storyboard, and we created a draw view. It's a view controller that loads a custom view, and it sets its own, or it sets the title on that view to draws remaining 0. The view contains a label and a button that are in a stack. We'll go over this again next time. And it lays them out such that the label is above the button, and when we look at it, they're centered on the screen. Oh, you know what? You're not seeing my text at all. You're not seeing my Xcode at all. There we go. So we have a view that is laid out and has a bunch of stuff. It has, as I say, it has a label, and it has a button. It positions the label above the button, and puts them both in the center of the view. And as I say, we'll go over this again last time because we are very much out of time, and I need to go finish cooking a chicken. So I'll just launch this bad boy, show you what the app looks like right now, going into going into stream number 2, which will be on Friday. So thanks everyone for joining and following along in chat and helping out. Also appreciate that. It's always good to have an extra set of eyes, or many extra sets of eyes, to look at stuff. And yeah, we will see you all again very, very soon. I'm sort of like holding off on my sign off until the simulator loads and I can like actually launch this thing to show where the app is at the end. Come on, you can do it. Poor little MacBook Air. You've got it in you. I believe in you. Everyone here believes in you. We did it. We launched the app. Almost there. Come on. Did it break? Did I somehow break it since last time? I don't think I did. There it is. All right. It was just taking forever to load. So yeah, we've got a button that does nothing and a label that says draws remaining. So we will get back to that, and I will go over what the UI is doing next time. Thank you all so much, and I will see you again really soon.